Hey everybody, welcome back to LA Not So Confidential. This is Dr. Shiloh, and of course I am joined remotely by
Dr. Scott. Hey folks, welcome back. Thanks so much for tuning in again.
So today we are going to jump right into our episode because we have a guest that is going to add a lot of depth and just the right amount of dry cop humor, I'm sure, to align with me a little bit on this one, because this is going to be very law enforcement centric, but very much psychology related as well. But today we're going to be talking about crisis negotiations, and I would like to welcome my friend Harry Drucker to LA Not So Confidential. Thanks for being here, Harry.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Sure.
Or
we are so glad.
Here.
Yeah, remotely. But thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show. We know that your experience, which we're going to hear all about, is really going to add to what we have to all talk about today. We always, with our guests, kind of talk about like how we even stumbled upon each other. And Harry and I happen to be part of the same organization that participates in training on crisis negotiations here in Southern California. And I'm sure we've been at several of these trainings together before, but just so happens at our last one, we ended up finally meeting because of a mutual friend. I guess we should say hi to Jeff because he listens and he would be upset if we didn't.
Hello,
so,
Jeff.
Hey, Jeff. But we all went to lunch together and just, started chatting in our little group. And Harry and I talked about podcasting a little bit. So Harry has 32 years on as a law enforcement officer here in Southern California, and he will be retiring in a matter of days. So maybe towards the end, we can figure out what the heck you're going to do after that. So
isn't this the point at which like something huge happens? Like in every cop movie, one of the cops is always like just a week away from retirement, and then something huge happens. Is that going to happen here?
I mean, look at what we're going through right now. I was a lot of people in my position will, take some time off a little bit right before retirement and burn some time. I've got a whole bunch of excess vacation and other time, and I do a lot of like Shiloh and probably yourself, Scott. I go around the country and I do a lot of training, and I'm constantly on the road, and I haven't been able to do that. So my crew that I work with has said, you're in the office more this past month than you've been in the past year. So this is the big, the COVID is the big thing that's happened. That's right before retirement. And I think we're all a little bit anxious about the whole thing, but I have been busier than I would have expected for something like this. So yeah, that's the big thing that's happening.
Yeah, definitely. Let's hope that's all it is. Scott.
Yeah, please.
Him, But if it happens, you can write a script about it and then sell that to Hollywood, and they'll turn it into shit like all these other movies we're going to talk about today.
Right.
But Harry also is a 2-time Emmy Award winner for a couple of commercials that you produced. Is that correct?
Yeah, public service announcements. So one was on surviving an active shooter, which it's a shame that we had to make that film. It's a short film, public service announcement or public service training film, and another one on safe gun storage. And I didn't even know they had Emmys for that, but Tuck News gets awards for the best broadcast and sports broadcast and things like that. So we won the public service announcement category for our gun safety PSA and independent programming for surviving an active shooter. And I'm extraordinarily proud of the people that I work with, because I was just a small part of it. And they are the brains behind the operation. I tell people that if you ever have seen with some confusion, as I have, Olympic curling, I'm the one with the broom. I just
that's really
get
important.
Things out of the way so they can do their great work, and they do great work.
So Harry, are those two pieces on Vimeo or YouTube, any place that we could link to on our site so that our listeners can see what you've produced?
Yes. Well, if you could probably put a link in there, which will reveal what agency I work with, but we'll give you those links. The film, the active shooter one, Surviving an Active Shooter, and at the time that we produced it, there were very few of those type of trainings for the public available. Now there's hundreds of them, so ours is a little hard to find, but we will link to them, and we just want, if one person survives an incident based on something that they've seen here, it's all worth it.
Right.
But it is a shame that we had to make both of those, because they were inspired by tragedy.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's important work, and they're really good. I got to see a couple of them. So, and then you have also been on another podcast, which is pretty LA centric, is Minor Adventures with Topher Grace. What was that experience like? It's pretty funny.
That was, it was a lot of fun. And as with a lot of podcasts, there was a little bit of coordination and pre-interviews. And my concern was it's a comedic podcast, and it was a lot of fun. I just wanted to make sure that they were at least allowing a little bit of instruction, as they do with all their adventures that they go through. And they took most of my suggestions and not others, but it was with Thomas Middleditch, who was an awesome improviser, and they each took turns playing suspects, and it was very comedic, but they allowed me to kind of act as coach and talk them through the negotiation, which of course was compressed for time and increased in hilarity, but to my expense at a couple of parts. But
yes,
that sounds like my experience. I was able to be on the first episode of the Ron Burgundy podcast.
Oh, really?
Where Will Ferrell was in character, but they wanted a forensic psychologist to come, and I told them, I'm like, look, I'll do it, but there's no way I'm not going to bust up. I'm not going to be able to hold it together.
Oh, yeah.
Like, oh no, that's fine.
Oh, did they want you to be straight? Like,
no. They were like, whatever happens. It was a pretty great experience, but yeah, he stayed in character the entire time. It was funny.
Really?
Yeah.
It was pretty brilliant. Harry, so can you tell us about your career and how it's led up to negotiation, but also what other assignments have you worked, and how did these 32 years go?
Well, they went way too fast at this point. I don't remember what happened, but I came on as a law enforcement officer in the late 80s. I like to mention that it was pre-Rodney King, because there was a big shift in just how law enforcement in general. But I work for an agency where you spend your first couple of years working in a jail, and which I did, and it was a major education for me, but also it kind of started forming the skills and the experience that led me to negotiation. That's just talking to people. Kind of that's always been my, as I look back on my career, I've always preferred, because I didn't have the skill to get physical with people. I was never into martial arts or anything like that. And I was mediocre with my firearms. So I had to develop that verbal skill. And I've heard several interviews with comedians that talk about they were beat up or they were bullied in school, and so that's where their sense of humor came from, as kind of a defense mechanism. And whether that's the case with me, or if it was because I wasn't very good with those physical skills, there was kind of a common thread even before I became a negotiator. But it worked patrol assignments. I had a couple of detective related assignments, and with the agency I work for, and probably 98% or 99% of police agencies around the country, negotiations is a collateral assignment. So I started doing that in 1996 while I was working as a detective. And I was kind of an odd kind of detective, because I helped. It was more administrative, and if our department was being sued, I would do a backup investigation with the attorneys to try and help a defense or determine if we were liable and if we had to settle the cases. But I started negotiating at that point. But my first negotiation was prior to going to the training. I was a field officer and had several incidents where, and let me back up by saying that train negotiation isn't anything super special. Law enforcement officers around and first responders all around the world do this type of thing. The communication skills, the active listening, the person with the training and negotiation maybe has a little more patience, a little more experience, and some specialized training. But this is something that first responders do all the time. And my first negotiation, the negotiation team responded, and as I would now as a team leader, they just evaluate how is that officer doing, and do we really even need to replace them, or are they doing a good job, and can we give them a little bit of help along the way, a little coaching, which is what happened in my first negotiation. But loved just the field and the skill set of negotiations, and just have been on ever since. Continuing, I'm a team leader now, so I don't negotiate as much, but I'm currently a sergeant with my agency, and working with the training division, doing the training films, but still subject to call. In fact, I had a call at 5:30 this morning. Turned out not to be an actual call out, but even with the COVID situation, we continue to get call outs. I think I've had 3 in the past couple weeks.
Yeah, it's kind of picked up at my agency as well. It's definitely not slowing down with people locked in their homes with their family members and drinking a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
It can be a very tense situation for a lot of people, rather than just kind of this lay at home and watch Netflix feel that, lots of other people think it is right now. So
watching all the 14 documentaries that you've pointed me toward with the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. So Scott, I guess that kind of leaves you and I to maybe talk about our experience or training when it comes to negotiations. Do you want to start?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this before we started recording, and Shiloh, you and I have talked about this in previous episodes, that when I moved to the position I'm currently in about 4 years ago, I got this fantastic opportunity to go to the FBI training on hostage negotiation, crisis negotiation, for a week. It was a week-long immersive experience, culminating in the use of really well-trained actors in 4 or 5 different scenarios. And I don't think I've ever, with the exception of being on an amazing roller coaster, I've never had like that level of exhilaration in a false scenario. Like, it's not real, but it feels very real. They've really set the whole thing up, and you're taught this set of skills. And as I think Harry was saying, is everybody has, you can train anybody to do it, but that doesn't mean everybody can do it the same way. And I certainly came away from it thinking, this is a really perishable skill. Like, if I don't practice this every day, I would never feel confident. I mean, I talk people down in psychiatric settings all the time, and maybe there's some sort of parallel there, but it was one of those where I was able to like kind of deflate my ego a good bit and walk out going, man, these people really know what they're doing. And I would love to become more facile at it, but I think you really have to stay on top of it. And I hope Harry will be able to circle around a little bit later and tell us, how do you keep your edge? I would be interested in hearing your appointment on that. Shiloh, what about you?
So I did CNT school when I started about a little less than 3 years ago. I went through LAPD's crisis negotiation school, their version of what you went to at the FBI. Same, I felt like, oh my God, this is going to be my thing, because it is such a mix of law enforcement and psychology. And I thought, I really need to know more about this. I want to do some deep dives and be really good at this, because with my agency, I was going to be a part of the crisis negotiation team, which I am, and which I have been now as a consulting psychologist, we're never on the phone with folks doing any negotiating, but we're part of the team actively consulting in the moment. So you have your primary negotiator, secondary negotiator, and then your psychologist. I am praying for that time where they're like running out of everybody, or they're like, we need a female I can get on the phone. I'm gonna make it happen before my career ends. But I also feel the same as you, Scott, that this has to be something that's practiced to get good at it. And I see the advantage to keeping a small rotation of negotiators so that they get a lot of experience and exposure to it. I mean, it can only work in their favor. But aside from that, I did work with one of my supervisors right when I came on to really sort of dive into the research a little bit more. And we ended up presenting at a National Chiefs Conference on psychology tradecraft that is used in crisis negotiations. And then just at the beginning of this year, I got a paper published also with my supervisor as a co-author, looking at the ethics of the psychologist working in crisis negotiations. So any training or anything like that I can soak up on this issue, I'm still feel like I'm in my infancy with it, but I had the opportunity to take the topic that we were working on for our Stockholm Syndrome episode and morph that into a training. And I ended up teaching that at the FBI's Crisis Negotiation School at the end of last year, and then doing that presentation a couple other places. So I love it. I feel like I'm very grateful for a lot of the opportunities that I have to kind of dive into it research-wise and psych-wise. And it's a blast. It's like, it is getting that phone call in the middle of the night sucks. But once you're there, it's kind of like the gym. Once you're there, it's great. And you definitely don't regret it afterwards.
I'd be interested in hearing both of your opinions on the psychologist as a negotiator. Why law enforcement generally doesn't do it. I know of one psychologist in Texas, that Dr. Andy Young, who does negotiate regularly with their police department there. But for the untrained, why don't law enforcement use psychologists as negotiators, and what do you think about that?
That's a great question. I don't know that I've ever even sort of asked that. I think just in my 3 years of experience, like a lot of things in law enforcement, that's just the way it's always been. And I haven't really, pushed back too much on that, just because, I'm kind of getting my feet wet and learning my role. We're given the same exact training. So when push comes to shove, I actually have heard of a couple of situations in which two of our psychologists have done some sort of negotiation. But I don't know, whether or not it's sort of stepping on toes and we're just seen as a consultant. I know for my agency, it's integrated to where the negotiators are also part of the SWAT team and are operators, so they're cross-trained. So, which I love. I love that model. It works out really well for a lot of different reasons, but I don't know if that has a piece of it too, where we are also a couple more steps removed because we're not SWAT operators and obviously not law enforcement officers. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, the worst case scenario in a situation utilizing a licensed psychologist in a situation like that, immediately I went, of course, because I'm a catastrophizer. So I immediately thought, okay, what if I was in a situation where it was a jumper over the 101 freeway? The 101 freeway, which cuts directly through Los Angeles, has many overpasses that provide ample opportunity for people to utilize them if they want to self-harm. But say that is somebody who is already within my mental health agency's database. Accessing that person's mental health record for purposes of de-escalating a situation, but then exposing everyone in the area around what would be protected information could potentially be a liability. But I think I'm taking, we're also talking about something in extreme emergency situations. Pretty much all of those things can and should take a back seat, but I can see where it might be problematic. And also, I can't help but think that you guys in law enforcement that are so highly trained at this, it just becomes second nature to you and you're flipping into it. I think it might be harder for a mental health clinician who's being pulled in a different direction. At least that was my experience in the training. As one of the instructors kept saying, you're doing this right and this right and this right, but you're not his therapist. Don't make it a therapy session. And that was difficult for me to not fall into that rut. But I think there's certainly some insights and skills and perspectives that a trained mental health professional can add to a scenario like that.
If you go back into how, there's always an evolution of how we learn from our mistakes and things like that. But they used to train law enforcement in negotiator school about specific diagnosis, personality disorders, and this is what an antisocial sounds like and looks like, and borderline and all that stuff. And what we're not trained psychologists, although sometimes we're thrust into that position of having to do a little bit of that work in the field. And I think they've changed the training to not really worry too much about the stuff that we don't know enough about, but about the behavior. What are we dealing with right now? This is a person in crisis. How are they acting right now? And that's why we partner with our mental health department and our clinicians to step in and say, this is what I think I'm hearing. This is the type of approach that I think will be effective. And then you go with that. But
that's something I think is great, especially, and in fact, if they have de-emphasized law enforcement having more of an exposure to some of those more florid personality disorders, then that's a sad loss, because you don't have to be, we're not going to hold you responsible for appropriate diagnosis, but in particular, when you talk about someone with antisocial personality disorder or borderline personality disorder, understanding that sort of set of behaviors is going to be helpful for law enforcement. So I hope that doesn't get completely.
There's still a basic understanding that goes on in the training, but not as much emphasis as I used to see, where it was almost like they didn't want the experts to come out. Not that they didn't want, but maybe they didn't know at the time. I've been doing it for over 23 years, so a lot has changed for the better, and that's one of the things that I saw as a difference.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a whole set of ethical issues that I think underlies it as well, when you're talking about not developing therapeutic relationships. There's even things that we have to consider, even just consulting. I need to make sure I'm not creating a therapeutic relationship with the subject's girlfriend who shows up on the scene, or promising her that everything's going to be okay.
Exactly.
I think, going back to what you were saying, Scott, there is a lot of liability. And if someone ends up getting harmed because of this, can we easily sort of put that under any sort of ethics and guidelines that we have under our codes that we have violated in some way? And there's several situations that maybe a tactical team, a SWAT team, they'll make a decision that maybe we're not good with because it's going to cause some harm somewhere. And we might have to step away and say, I'm just the consultant. This is what I'm saying and advising, but I have to disengage a little bit at this point because you guys want to, put the 5-year-old on the phone to say, hey, daddy, please come out, and promising that, everything's going to be okay, when what potential harm and damage could be done if it doesn't turn out okay. So a lot.
That's a great example. Ethically. That's a great example.
Yeah. And, I think another thing that we use our clinicians for is some, lately we've been walking away from certain instances where there's no crime.
Right.
We do our best to talk somebody out who is made suicidal statements or things like that. And, but, law enforcement, we used to say, oh, if there's a gun involved, we're going to go in and we're going to, but in many cases were killing people to prevent them from killing themselves. We showed them, so now if we're going to disengage as an entire law enforcement, profession from this one, particular incident, we don't just walk away cold. We will give any family members the access or information for resources of what happens next. Even if the individual does get taken into custody, a lot of times they're only good for a 72-hour hold. And then we all know, maybe even less than that, they'll be right back out. And there's no aftercare. With law enforcement, it's like, okay, on to the next call. See you guys at the next one. And there's not a lot of follow-up. And that's where the DMH or other mental health professionals can really, really help by giving the family a place to turn to when the crisis at hand is over and they've got to deal with what happens next.
Yep, that's exactly what Scott does in his position, which is just, it's I think, who are we talking to, Scott? But they were talking about or asking about how long that's been going on. Oh, I think it was the interview we did with 3 Men and a Mystery. They were like, wow, that sounds so progressive for your agency.
It's been going on for a decade.
Yeah. But it is in a lot of ways of just how do we really tackle this problem of people with mental health issues coming in and out of the criminal justice system when all they need is, maybe a few more resources or follow-up by mental health. So,
but, building on what Harry was talking about earlier, that disengagement from a barricade when there's no weapon involved, I can't even tell you how that raises my blood pressure, because I get the referral on my desk and I have to figure out, what can I do here? Is this person mentally ill? Is this person, basically mentally ill because of chronic continuous drug use? Are there weapons in there that we don't know about? I get we don't want to kill people in order to keep them from killing themselves, and that would be a very bad thing, but it's made things complex in a way that I think was unavoidable, but we do our best.
Right.
A lot of what we do is just real quick, a lot of what we do, unfortunately, for good or bad, is driven by litigation. And I spent those years as a civil litigation investigator, and it has shaped a lot of things that law enforcement does, for better or for worse. And I think that entire walk-away type structure developed out of that. And it's unfortunate, but you kind of figure out why they do that. Definitely.
So the majority of situations in which a negotiating team would be called to are situations in which there is a lone barricaded suspect, somebody probably with a weapon that doesn't want to leave and has likely committed a crime. That's why the police are there. Or a suicidal subject that we're trying to prevent that person from dying by suicide. It's pretty rare for there to be a hostage situation, right, Harry?
In my over 400 responses that I've had in my career, I believe 3 or 4 true hostage situations that we've had. There's a bank robbery, a restore robbery, and a couple others, but it is very rare. It's kind of cool to say, hey, I'm a hostage negotiator, but you rarely negotiate those type of situations. I think there's when there's another person other than the main suspect who's in a location, the fallback for most of the untrained is to say, oh, it's a hostage, but it has everything to do with how the subject views that person. Are they a tool to achieve some means? Are they a shield to prevent the police from coming in? Or are there some other, maybe an emotional background, maybe they're an estranged relationship or something, and those are more dangerous than a hostage situation. Hostage situations are rare, but kind of the quintessential situation that you think of as a bank robbery. And back in the early 2000s, my team handled a bank robbery where it was pretty much what you would think it would be. Person goes into the bank, puts a note to, I have a gun, give me the money, to the teller, and the hostage situation goes from there. Luckily, at this particular bank, there were no other customers inside. It was early in their business day, and it turned into an 8-hour situation. There were 9 employees inside, and as the day went on, the 9 turned into 7, turned into 6, 5, and on down. And then we were dealing with a solo barricade. But everything that dealt up to that point, which was about maybe 6 hours into it, was a true hostage situation.
Wow. So the FBI didn't, swoop in and take that over from you?
That's another thing I see from movies and TV. The FBI will generally, what they do is they offer resources, and they offer their hostage rescue team at that incident and investigative resources. And in the end, when the suspect was talked out, when he surrendered, they actually took him into custody. But as far as the actual handling of the negotiation, that was all our agency did a, if I do say so myself, a fantastic job of it. We had another incident at a pretty major jewelry store. And this was another one where, just by luck or happenstance, not that it's a good thing that you have a hostage, but all the hostages were employees, and 2 suspects. And it was one of these jewelry stores where it's a double door, and you have to be kind of buzzed in through the second door. And I believe, if my memory serves, the guys were wearing like clown makeup, and they actually were buzzed in through the door, which, the lesson from that is don't be so complacent that you don't just, without even looking, hit the button.
Because clowns are creepy, right?
That's right. I heard your episode. So that turned into about a 16 or 18 hour
wow.
siege. And in the end, that went, as we've seen in movies as well, the suspects wouldn't come out. They feared that they were going to get shot by the SWAT team, and they came out with several of the hostages, or if I remember right, they were surrounded by the hostages. There was a little, in all the incidents I handled, this speaks to your piece that you did at the training, Shiloh. There was a little bit of Stockholm that came in. It was a lot of hostility toward law enforcement from the hostages, and a lot of kind of defending. They're nice guys. Just give them what they want, and we can all go home. So a little bit of Stockholm there.
Interesting. Well, so let's talk about our first movie on our list, which is Hostage. I love a good Bruce Willis movie, but man, this one was a little rough. So he, okay. I feel like I definitely have the formula down for hostage movies now that I've watched like 5 in the last few days.
First, it's either Denzel Washington, Bruce Willis,
Samuel Jackson,
Sam Jackson, Clive, what's his name, or Gerald Butler. It's like those 5 guys. It's like, I don't want to ever be around any of them in a bank.
I know.
Right.
So of course, like with all of these, this opens with a very tense, in the middle of a major hostage situation where the negotiator is like feet from the hostage taker and like entering some real
right.
dangerous situation that would never happen, usually like exchanging themselves for hostages or, going rogue and like coming up with their own idea. But he's an LAPD SWAT negotiator in this movie when it opens, and it goes terribly wrong. And he literally has the blood on his hands of a child, which they do a really big close-up of the blood on his hands. That was a rough scene. In case you did not understand what they're trying to say. After that, he leaves the department and becomes the chief of a small town, small police agency up in Ventura County, where it's nice and quiet every single day. And of course, trouble's going to follow Bruce Willis, right? So
yes. What is his line? Let's have this be Low Crime Thursday or something like that.
Right, something like that. So in this small town, a group of like young adults, teenagers, attempts to carjack this wealthy family at their home, and ends up taking the father and the teenage daughter and the, I don't know, 8-9-year-old son hostage when things turn sideways. The twist to all this is that the father is dirty. He's like working for this entity, whatever, funneling money for them. And he's supposed to be giving them like bank account numbers or something that night, but he gets taken hostage, so he can't. And so Bruce Willis ends up doing a little bit of negotiating at the beginning, and then quickly the sheriff's department takes it over. But the big bad guys then take Bruce Willis's wife and daughter hostage and say, you got to go get in that house and get us the information. So there's like these two hostage situations going on. It's very complex. No,
Yes.
it's not.
So
But-
Harry.
So yeah, no. So how would you critique this? No, I'm just kidding. But I think in the very first scene when he's still with LAPD, there is a psychologist on scene, but that person does nothing. He just kind of references him. He's just like a disheveled man in a suit.
Yes. Sweating and unshaven.
Yeah, exactly. There are no like real good depictions of psychologists.
I think you subscribe to this in your podcast when you talk about movies, that there has to be, we all acknowledge that this is the entertainment world and there has to be some level of suspending disbelief. But I'll look at something and go, that might happen. But when they go way over the top like this, that's when they lose me, and where a lot of movies do. But there are a couple of good things about what his character does. But very few.
So what did you see, Harry, that seemed to be decent representations of negotiations?
Well, one of the things that we talk about very early on in negotiator training is tone. And when he is talking in that first scene, when he's with LAPD and he's talking to this suspect who's very agitated, his tone is very calm. His speech pattern is slow and low. And that's what we want. We want to do that, and hopefully to bring a person who's experiencing very high emotion to bring them down to our level. We don't want to yell back at them, which sometimes happens with our first responders. Come out with your hands up. Drop the gun. You have to be by design. You have to be have a strong voice. But with negotiations, we slow it down and we softened it a little bit. Very good. Going forward to when he's talking to the little boy in the house, really great about building rapport, and they're talking about a video game, and that's a great example of how we try to make that connection. Even though he's talking to a hostage at that point, he does pretty good in there. It's the tossing the whiteboard down that says "No one dies today" and running to the front of the location, yelling "Shoot me, shoot me." I missed that day of training. I don't think we do that.
Yeah, not one of his negotiations works out the way he wants it to. They all go to shit. Like, he talks to the little boy great, but he's not so great with the hostage takers.
Yeah, so. Maybe because he doesn't have a coach. That's
yeah, he's on his own. Exactly.
Which is the number one criticism I have of every negotiator movie. With very few exceptions, it is a negotiator who goes on at it alone.
Right. So a coach would be a secondary negotiator, or the person that's jotting down some notes and pushing them, coming up with ideas to help, because it is very hard to sort of do two things at once: concentrate on the person you're speaking with, but also think up, okay, where am I going with this?
That was one of the things that was fascinating to me about the training, because I had no clue going in that there is a structure that can be utilized for this type of action. And it involves the person who is actually, the communicator, then there's the coach organizer, and then there are other people who are in charge of gathering and collating and prioritizing information, and then it's slowly funneled through so that the person's not overwhelmed. That I thought was fascinating. Shiloh, you looked at like you have disbelief. Didn't you have what I did? There were like four or five people on our team when we were doing it.
I have disbelief because I almost shared my screen on Zoom right now. Sorry. I think this is a really good opportunity to break for some sponsors, and we'll be back in a moment. All right, we are back, everyone. So we're going to move into talking about another very famous film, literally called The Negotiator. So this is from 1998. Samuel L. Jackson, Kevin Spacey. You guys probably recall this one. This was right around like Kevin Spacey 7, like prime. Just Seven's one of my favorite movies ever. So I definitely remember this era. But the premise here is that Samuel L. Jackson is being framed for his partner's murder at work, and he finds out there's probably some people in his division that are dirty and involved. So he decides to take the people in the IA office hostage to find out who did this, who killed his partner, and what the truth is. So
Can I do that at work? I think I could get some questions answered if I did that at work.
Would you ask for me to be your negotiator?
Yes, but you'd have to negotiate with Dee Dee.
Oh, dear God. Oh, I could do that. So yeah, he asks for a specific negotiator who works at a different division because then he won't be dirty, even though they don't know each other very well. And that's Kevin Spacey. So great action movie. Takes place in Chicago. Thoughts? Anyone want to start off with just like thoughts about the movie in general?
Do you know that this is based on a real incident?
No.
That occurred in Missouri.
No. Do tell.
Of course, the details were tweaked. That's why I said inspired and not based. There was an officer, and I think it was St. Louis, who there was an issue with corruption in the organization that handled the police pensions, and there was a problem going on, and an officer went and took hostages in the business in the pension office, I think it was, and asked for a specific negotiator who was retired from that same agency. And the agency contacted that who would be in the Negotiator movie would be the Kevin Spacey character. They contacted him. He was not in the same town, but he was close enough that he could respond. He offered to come help, and they said, no thanks. We'll handle this on our own. And it ended up resolving as best as you can maneuver. And that officer did go to prison over it, but it was pretty far from the plot of the movie, but it was based on that or inspired by that incident.
Well, that's really interesting. I think, gosh, I would love to know more about that. But yeah, there's a few things in here that I just love as watching a film that are really great. Of course, Samuel L. Jackson and Kevin Spacey are always awesome. But it's really interesting to look at the different types of active listening skills that are sort of used. I just want to review, kind of talk about active listening skills for a moment. Scott and I have talked about this, and we did a little bit in our Con Men episode as well, when we talked about, ways in which to kind of persuade people. And a lot of negotiating is about changing people's beliefs and attitudes in order to change their behavior. Hence the reason why it is so based in psychology. And active listening skills can be a huge piece of that, which, are things that we teach in basic, counseling 101. And like you were referring to earlier, Harry, like what cops use on the street every day. And Scott, what you're talking about therapeutically that we use in the therapy room with people. So whether or not we are paraphrasing something that they said to let them know we're hearing them and we're understanding them, or that we're trying to get them to say more. And a lot of times you're just trying to keep people talking when you're conducting a negotiation, because ultimately at the end of this, you want to, time is on your side. So you want to bring someone's emotions down so that they can start thinking better and making more rational decisions. Any comments on that? Scott, you want to talk about how cognitive functioning works when someone's emotionally dysregulated?
Well, just building on what you said, that's sort of a basic in our clinical therapeutic training. You do at the master's level, you do at the doctorate level. So it was really neat during the CNT training that I was part of to have that really emphasized by these negotiators like Harry, that you want to expand time as much as possible and slow things down, because when you slow things down, the person on the other end actually has time to take a breath. So what we're trying to do is we're modulating our tone and our frequency, and we're using more of a calming, soothing, responsive voice rather than, you don't want to match where they're going, because that only escalates the situation. So you can do that. We do that as parents. We do that as pet owners. We do that as business people in meetings, as we modulate and regulate our tone in order to pull people into our rhythm of speaking where we can have more control. At least that's the way I've always conceptualized it.
Anything additional, Harry, to add to that?
Well, yeah, you mentioned matching and mirroring, which is one of the active listening skills, and that is something that we try to do, at least verbally, to let them know that we're listening. But as far as when they're agitated, you don't want to match or mirror that. Earlier on, when we were talking about the different team members of a negotiation team and the role of the coach. In the Negotiator movie, in that opening scene where Samuel Jackson's doing a negotiation, he's got his coach there, and it's almost like he's training him. But that's kind of the setup where you'll have somebody. We never go it alone. We always have somebody there to help us out and provide those kind of either an idea of what to say if you run out of things to say, or what to try. Like if we're looking for those hooks, something that means something to them, and if the suspect has a daughter that means a lot to them, the coach might write, tell them that the daughter, can't wait to see him later, something like that, where they would write him a note. And that's going on in the beginning of the Negotiator movie. And then toward, later on when Kevin Spacey comes in, that same character that who was the coach at the beginning, he's in the command post, but they don't really use him. He's just kind of standing there, kind of like the example Shiloh gave in Hostage, where the psychologist is just standing there sweating in the corner. He is there in the command post.
Yeah, there's, and then of course, another example of that is in the first scene of The Negotiator, when, of course, Samuel L. Jackson goes into the apartment with the hostage taker and lets him hold him at gunpoint. But they start talking about being military vets and finding that similar thing to get that person talking. But it's really interesting because military vets are actually the subject of quite a few either suicidal or barricade type situations, with a lot of the mental illness that we are finding these days in these situations. And I had one that actually I've been on the negotiation team for this person twice, almost to the month, a year apart, where he found a very tall bridge in Los Angeles to go stand on top of. And the theme throughout this really had to do with his military history. And what we really wanted to do was kind of hone in on that, because it was what he was talking about. And it speaks to this this idea of identity protection trap. And I don't like the word trap necessarily, but that's sort of what we call this tactic, in which you are taking whatever or however they identify and wanting to protect that for them. And so this was a situation in which we could kind of take what he was saying and sort of using it against his idea of either jumping off this bridge or remaining up there, and saying, look, you served your country proudly. This doesn't line up with what you're doing right now, and you haven't committed a crime. So, we can still have you come down, get you the help that you need, and that will help resolve this. And so sort of protecting his identity and how he identifies and what's important to him is something that is very much a psychological tactic. There's another one called rationalization trap. That's a little bit of a method of getting the person to sort of think the solution is their idea as well, which is always nice if they can feel like they're a part of the decision-making process and rationalize that in their mind, then that can help de-escalate and resolve the situation as well. But it was really interesting in The Negotiator, because the whole reason why he took these people hostage was because of this identity of him being a good, ethical, non-dirty cop. But so many people don't know what to think, because they don't know, did he kill his partner? Did he not? It's kind of set up to look that way. And so Kevin Spacey's job is to not know if he's innocent or guilty and come in and try to protect his identity to help negotiations.
Right. And duty and honor are big themes when negotiating with military personnel and other police officers. And that's probably the one I fear, having to negotiate with another officer, especially those who've gone through some negotiation training, which we've had a handful of those. But that's was the negotiator in your bridge jumper incident, did they have military background?
So the first time around, no. And we were able to get the individual down because we got the VA actually to agree to come out to the scene and meet him right away. So we got a representative from the VA there. Second time around, when he was up on top of the bridge, he was actually dressed in his entire Marine Corps blues and was streaming live on Facebook from the top of the bridge, which was just crazy and surreal. And I actually just did a quick Google search of the person's name and found that he was streaming live. So that was like my little contribution of the night of like, oh, I got a little bit more intel right here on my cell phone. And people were incredibly encouraging. They were like, hey, I'm a vet too. Like, you have so much to live for. And
you mean people commenting on
Yes,
Facebook?
yes. Which I was like, please don't let there be that troll that's like, just do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
People were like, you can come and stay at my house, and like wonderful messages.
Wow, that's great.
But it also kind of was encouraging to him to keep up what he was doing, because I think he was getting a little bit of the validation that he needed. And maybe in a moment, Harry, you can talk about like expressive needs and like something along those lines. But so the second time, because I was like, oh, we know who this guy is, we did have a brand new negotiator who had never negotiated before, but he was a Marine, and we put him on the phone. He did amazing and was able to talk this guy down again. So it was a really strong connection point, because obviously something we did last time wasn't perfect because he went up again. And that's kind of the situation we were like, oh, crap, here we go with a frequent flyer, unfortunately, is what we kind of refer to them as. But, what can we do different or new this time? And that was really the thing, was having someone to connect with him over that. Do you want to help explain to our folks, like expressive needs versus instrumental needs when a hostage taker or a barricaded subject is asking for something?
Sure. There's sometimes you don't know what the person wants, and it's part of the negotiation to try and find out. We're trying to de-escalate their emotions and get them to a point where we can have a dialogue and really find out what it is that caused them to be where they're at. Some cases we know that through the intel gathering process, but When those needs or those demands come up, they will generally fall into two categories, either expressive or instrumental. And instrumental are the kind of the concrete things that they want, and they usually start pretty grandiose. Where a bank, like our bank robber, his demands were he wanted all the police to go across the street to a given location where he could see them. He wanted us to open up traffic, and then he wanted to get into a car and leave with 2 hostages. And then when it was safe, he'd let them go. So very clear, this is what I need, this is what I want. And a lot of times those are easily negotiated down to lesser items, like we'll send in sandwiches or something like that. In that bank robbery incident, he did not leave with anyone. The time that he left was to surrender and be taken into custody.
Or in the movies, they always want a helicopter.
Right, helicopter, a fueled up
jetliner.
We can talk about Dog Day Afternoon later, but and it's the important thing is to understand that we're not judging those demands. They can be whatever you want. In the podcast I did with Topher Grace, the demands were pretty interesting, but it's just to understand what it is that they want, and just let them know that you understand what that is that they want, and then you communicate that to command whether or not it's even able to be fulfilled. The other version or the other type of demand or need that a subject might have is an expressive need. It's not something concrete that you can put your finger on necessarily, but they want something to fulfill some type of emotional need, or something they're in crisis mode and they need this. And sometimes that's something we can provide if it's just an ear that is going to truly listen through active listening skills and let them feel and understand through empathy that we are there to help them through the moment. But sometimes it's something we can't. We're like something like, I want you to bring my dead mother back, or something like that, and that's obviously not something that we could do.
But it can give you a lot of information of where their head's at. I think that
absolutely.
If it's information, and if it's informing, then obviously that's helping you, even though you can't do any of those things.
Right. And, I think a lot of the untrained, through no fault of their own, they will go leap towards fulfilling those needs. We dealt with a jumper one year, and that the first responder came up and was giving them water and pretty much giving them all these things, instead of saying, maybe putting the water down just out of their reach, so they would have to come to the safe side of the bridge to get that. So if you fulfill every need that comes up, they're going to keep asking for more and more, and there's not going to be any progress towards a surrender. And just a comment about the word surrender. That's not a word that we use with our subjects. Yes, that's what we want them to do, but that is often seen as a giving up. And not with dignity. So we'll try to select certain words. And I'm also fond of, saying, when you come out, and I use when instead of if, when we're in the early stages. They may not be ready to discuss what we're looking for surrender, but we'll get them to start thinking about it. Hey, I know you're not ready now, but when you come out, we need you to come out the front door and make sure there's nothing in your hands, because we don't want anything bad to happen to you.
You're planting a seed.
Yeah, definitely. So, Scott, I don't know. Are you muted? You muted yourself for a second.
Yeah,
okay.
You're planting a seed. We kind of do that in the therapeutic process as well. Is instead of using closed end possibilities, you keep the end open, that there's a lot of things that could happen here, and you're kind of generating an expectation or a possibility that this is going to be resolved peacefully. I think that's important for me to remember from this. I think that's something I'll walk away from with this.
And it's a step towards, I forgot what Shiloh called it, but where you get them to the point where they believe that this plan, the eventual surrender, was actually their idea.
Right, right. So there's, I don't know who they consulted with for this film, but there's a lot of like, and I get it because there's two negotiators talking to each other, but there's a lot of this like, well, this is in the manual and this is negotiation 101. There's actually my favorite scene, which is probably the most memorable, is where they have kind of like a filler guy on the phone with Samuel L. Jackson, and he's telling him, you never say no. And then he's trying to trick him up, and the guy says no. And then he pretends that he shot somebody, and this poor guy is just like sweating. And, he's
That's
asking
the
him
guy
all
who was
these.
his coach at the beginning.
Yeah, I think so. And so another thing that sort of happens in this film, which is interesting to talk about, is Kevin Spacey, even towards the end, after they've built up a decent rapport, tries to bluff Samuel L. Jackson by bringing in a character that isn't actually who he is. And Samuel L. Jackson catches him in the lie because he has some background info on who this person is supposed to be. So, and I feel like they kind of gloss over the piece of like, we really try to never lie. And there might be a little subtle deception or smoothing over of things involved, but how do you feel about sort of that golden rule of not lying to subjects?
That's something that it's a very much last resort type of thing. I don't even suggest it to command unless you really think that it's, first of all, that you've got a good possibility of actually working. Shiloh, you mentioned the term frequent flyer. I mean, that's the thing that we're guarding against, not just this incident, but what's going to happen to the next one. Hey, the cops lied to me last time. I don't believe a word you're saying. And then it takes them that much longer to build rapport and establish credibility. So we try not to do it. I know in a handful of situations, again, over the 23 years, maybe 4 times that we've done that. And one of them was where there was a crime involved, but this person needed to get some mental health care, and the negotiator lied to them and said they weren't going to jail. They were going to just go to a hospital. One in particular that I was negotiating, there was a guy, he actually sent us a picture. He was despondent over a breakup of his marriage. The soon-to-be ex-wife was at the command post, and all he wanted was he wanted us to let her come into the house, and he wanted to talk to her. He said, "Yes, I'll go to the hospital, but I want to talk to her alone." He even sent us a picture on the phone with the shotgun in his mouth. So, at this point, we were kind of at a standstill, and command was considering walking away from this. There was no crime. And what we ended up doing was tell him, look, yeah, she can come in there, but we're not going to let her in with the weapons. If you come out and sit on the either the sidewalk or the porch, I can't remember what it is, let us go in and secure those weapons, then we'll let her in. Of course, he came out, and we took him into custody, and he went to for a 72-hour hold and to get some care. But that, again, this wasn't a guy who'd ever been in trouble before, no law enforcement contact, but that sets up such, a bad, because how's he going to trust the next one? So we try not to do it.
Right. Yeah. Or, heaven forbid you get caught in that lie somehow, and it's just going to take that current negotiation. It's just going to go to shit, because now all that rapport you've built up is going to be gone.
It's not impossible to recover from that, but it's pretty darn hard.
Yeah. I also noticed in this film a couple of ways in which they sort of do what we call like playing hardball. One was pretty unlikely to ever happen, where Samuel Jackson is calling and Kevin Spacey just keeps like hanging up on him, like being kind of pissy with him and just hanging up. And I don't know, I would never hang up on Samuel L. Jackson, but especially not in his heightened state.
Right.
But also another one is where he tells him, like, basically, you're out of time. Like, the SWAT team is about to come in. They've told me I've done all I can do. It's not good enough. And that's more realistic of, hey, look, like, they're telling me my job is done unless you come out right now. They're making their plans to come in. So I thought that part was pretty realistic, but it's kind of funny to compare the two like hardball situations there.
Right. And, the decision, as far as, and we've used that before, that we don't say, my time is up. We'll say, they're only going to let me talk to you for so long. And the implication is, or they're coming in, but you try not to say that. But, I'd be very cautious of that. And that's something that the team leaders will talk about, of is that type of ultimatum, if you want to call it, is that likely to lead to the person committing self-harm or violence against somebody else. So there's very few actual rules in the rule book that are followed to the letter, and there is no rule book that is to the letter because of things like that. Every situation is different, and you don't want to hang up on somebody, even if it's a calculated move, without some serious thought to it. Even though in the movie it was, it seems like it was he had a good reason for it, but it was pretty impulsive and right on the moment.
Yeah. So with our time that we have left, I want to talk about third-party intermediaries. I knew I was going to screw that word up.
TPI.
Yeah, TPIs. But there's a couple of The Negotiator. There's a scene where they use a TPI. Dog Day Afternoon is a good example as well. And then you suggest a movie called JCVD. It is literally Jean-Claude Van Damme's, or JCVD, yeah. His initials, and the movie is about him playing himself. It's originally in French. It's from 2002. You can find it dubbed over, which is how I had to watch it. I prefer subtitles as well, but...
they made that into a Netflix series where he's playing himself, but what we don't know is he's disguising himself as an action star when he really is a superhero or like a...
Oh my God.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's unwatchable. It's completely unwatchable.
Who is advising
so
his
weird.
career?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, in this movie, he plays himself sort of coming home to Brussels, and, he's 47 years old or something like that. And he gets mixed up in this robbery that's going down at the post office. And all the people on the outside think he's the one that has committed this robbery because he is the last person seen going in. The cop that hears the shots kind of sees his face in the window, and then the real robbers put him on the phone to make the demands. So here the world's like, oh my God, Jean-Claude Van Damme is robbing a post office in Brussels. It's pretty awful, but I watched it nonetheless. So he's estranged from his ex-wife and daughter, but it's really funny because they think they've kind of like scored in finding his mom and bringing her in to put her on the phone. But turns out he hasn't seen his mom since he was a child. Like, he has zero relationship with her. But here she is crying, like, there's my baby, of course, because he's a big star. But the thing is that they put her on the phone live. And I think, Harry, you and I would probably both have a problem with that, right?
Definitely. That's another one of those last resort type things. You're always going to have somebody that comes to the command post saying, I can talk him down, I can talk him out. He always listens to me. And then
right.
We don't know what the whole background is. But that's, it's easier said than done, and it's rarely effective.
Yeah. So the preferred method is to get as much background as possible, which is what I actually really like helping out on. The detectives on scene usually ask me to come with them to help sort of vet the backstory of the relationship between these two people. And then we don't have to put them on live because we can have them make a recorded tape. And what we'll do is we'll have them record a message. We can do it a couple of times, until they feel comfortable or they sort of get it right. And then we listen to make sure they're not saying anything that would be agitating or a little dig there. Yeah, triggering. So that's a really interesting part about, I think, my piece in it. but we can make a record and it can be just as effective, especially you don't have this back and forth. The person is just saying their message, and whether or not we play that over the phone or the loudspeaker, that can often be, again, another seed that's planted of, oh, what am I really doing here? Kind of that anchor or that hook of, man, other people are really being impacted by this, and bringing that person out of their really dysregulated state.
And the great thing about them is you can do a second take or a third take if you have to.
Yeah.
And I've heard some that are, you listen to the tone, it's like, this person doesn't care. Let's, once again with feeling, right?
Yeah. Tell them to play that up a little bit. You don't want it to be totally fake where the person's like, this isn't impacting me at all, but you can do it with multiple people. If mom and dad and sister are there, whoever, use one, see how effective it is. If you feel like you need to use more, I think it also goes to sort of being able to show the depths and the lengths that you went to on this type of situation of really trying everything when you have, maybe a situation that doesn't resolve so well, or that ends up having to have tactical intervention, that is the extra little mile that the negotiators went to try and have some sort of emotional connection with a TPI.
We handled an incident in 2013 where a police officer from another agency that was neighboring us got shot by a suspect, and led to a very long barricade. And the suspect, during the negotiation, when we were offline with him, he was trying to contact family members, including his mother, who was elderly and in a care facility, but she was brought to the command post willingly. We did a third-party recording, a TPR with her. And there's a moment, it was the timing of playing the recording was brilliant, because he was very agitated at that moment. He was upset with the fact that his attempted communications with his mother were being intercepted, and he just had a lot that he wanted to discuss with her. And he realized at this point he was going to jail for a very long time. We play the recording, and it was a complete change. It completely just de-escalated where he was at and calmed him down quite a bit. So they are very effective.
Do you remember in that particular situation, can you give us an idea of the content or what it was that the grandmother said in that message that was so impactful?
Well, it was his mother, and I think she was just saying, that one of the things she said when she started was, "You've always listened to me. We're all here. We care about you. We just need you to listen to what they're saying." And he wanted to talk to her, and that was kind of the carrot at the end of the stick, that when you come out, we guarantee you that we'll give you time with your mom. And she says, I'm here. I've been brought to the scene, and as soon as you come out, I will talk to you, but it starts with you listening to them.
Yeah.
But I think what did it was her saying, "You've always listened to me," kind of like, "You've always been a good boy," even though he was an old time gang member and had just shot a police officer. But it was that, I guess, the realization that she was there. He wasn't getting the runaround and different information about where she was. Because at one point he called the negotiator a liar when he told him that his mother was at the scene.
Oh, wow.
Of course, when he hears that, he's like, "We'll put her on the phone."
Yeah.
But we definitely had a hard no by command that we were not going to be putting her on the phone.
So, for all the years you've been doing this, can you give us a perspective on the types of colleagues, personalities that you've had experience with? What qualities do you see in your peers that would immediately ring a bell for you? Like, this man or this woman has it. This is going to be a person who's really going to get this. And on the opposite end, is there anything that would be an immediate red flag characterologically that you'd go, yeah, this is not a good candidate?
You froze there for a second. I saw a blur of your hand when you went like that, but I got your question.
Yeah. So who's a good candidate versus who's a bad candidate?
Well, I think a lot of specialized assignments in law enforcement, we look for the person with a clean record and a really very active, and I'm actually not looking for that. What I'm looking for when I'm bringing new team members on is life experience. What is it? Have they dealt with adversity in their life?
Oh, that's fascinating.
And also, family members. Do they have family members who have mental illness or have addiction? There's plenty of cops out there, as you both know, who have addiction problems with alcohol and other things, and it's the stressors of the job. So, how have they dealt with those? That adversity in their life and come out on the other end. It also is huge for empathy. We teach that giving empathy is something that is important in active listening in the road to building rapport. But a lot of people have to kind of manufacture that empathy. If you've got that that background of real situations and adversity and have come out the other end, okay, you can really be empathetic towards somebody. So that's one of the things that I look for. And when we're, we mentioned veterans earlier, having a variety of experiences and life experience makes a good team. We've got a guy who was military. He was nearly lost his life when he was deployed in either Afghanistan or Iraq to an IED. He suffers through PTSD, and did I say that right? I always get the PTSD, and he can truly be empathetic. He's great with gang members, but I wouldn't necessarily put him on with a suicidal person who didn't have some of those experiences. But there's other people on the team. We mentioned Jeff before. He volunteers on the suicide lines once a week. Phenomenal negotiator, great tone. He does have military experiences as well. But it's kind of like the old Mission Impossible series, where at the beginning of each episode, Peter Graves would, figure out what the mission was, and then he'd go through and select what people to put on the team. Same thing with negotiation.
That great example, and we're totally dating ourselves by knowing what that means.
Yeah,
because the manila envelope with all the different photos, and right. That was awesome.
Tape self-destructing.
Yeah.
So, probably the ones, the other side of your question of what, who I wouldn't want is probably somebody who is the talker, someone who is, always has a story and is they're a good communicator, but it's pretty much one way. I mean, they're the ones.
The one-upper.
Exactly. Yeah. That's one of them. Or somebody who's not really wants to go with their own program and make their own rules in a negotiation. And I've worked with plenty of those where the team has decided to have a strategy, and this is what we're going with. And they say, well, I want to try this thing. And some of that has to do with some of the things we've already talked about lying, coming up with something and lying about it, switching negotiators. I've had to pull a couple negotiators during negotiation because they were just going off on their own program, and we are doing something by a strategy that's pretty well thought out, and it's successful because we stick with those strategies and we work on it. And if we have to go off in another direction, we do so as part of a decision-making process that we discuss and we put into play.
I think peer support members would be great people to pull from if, you look in sort of that cadre, because they do tend to have a lot of life experience that has drawn them to doing peer support work, and very much have, sort of honed those skills as counselors. So in retirement, if you need consultants, to help pick, we're here. So I also wanted to touch on a classic film, Dog Day Afternoon from 1975, starring Al Pacino. This was also heavily inspired by a real story that happened in August of 1972 in Brooklyn, New York. So the individual in this story, he and some buddies wanted to rob a bank, and the story goes that it was to pay for the gender reassignment surgery of his lover. And they actually had attempted to rob a couple of banks that day. The first one they went into, one of them dropped a shotgun and it went off, and they got freaked out and fled and left. They found another bank to go into, and then they ran into like someone's mom, like one of their friends' moms in there. And so they left and drove around for a while. They actually went and saw the Godfather film, and then went to a third bank and go in, slip a note that says, "This is an offer you can't refuse," to the bank manager. So they really thought this out great, as you could tell. But the movie does such a wonderful job at sort of depicting the tomfoolery aspect of it, as well as just kind of the desperation from the hostages' point of view too. It's kind of funny because the hostages are way more put together than the hostage takers in this situation. This was a real situation where it was a media circus. Let's see, this is a little bit prior actually to Stockholm Syndrome and Patty Hearst. So again, sort of one of these first scenarios where there's like live media coverage and just the whole city is down there watching it happen live. Harry, you were talking about some examples of TPIs in this film that are also pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, pretty much anybody who offered up, they were putting him on the negotiation in the movie. The great film, Al Pacino, wonderful performances, but everybody who had any connection with him was able to. It's almost like they had a lineup of people and just, here, let's try this person, let's try that person.
Right.
So the Chris Sarandon character, who's the guy who's he was getting the money for the surgery, they put him on, and he's an absolute mess. Go back to the hospital.
Yeah.
Did he faint or swoon? It was very dramatic.
Right. It was.
His wife gets on, and that completely goes awry. They bring his mother out, and not only do they have her negotiate, they actually have a contact visit outside. And I don't know, maybe in your research, in the real situation, were the suspects coming out of the bank like they were and just kind of interacting with everybody in the street?
I don't know if they were interacting with the TPIs. I know the story about the pizza is true. So they ordered pizzas and then paid for the pizza with the money from the bank. And then with the crowds that were around, they were throwing bills out to the crowd during this whole thing. So they were very much being rooted on by the crowd in this situation. But of course, they're getting money, so they were all for the free entertainment.
Was it recently after Attica?
Yes, it was. So they were, screaming Attica, and so this one ends truly, and in the movie, with a ruse. So the FBI does come in and eventually negotiate with them that they will take them in sort of this caravan to the airport, where there will be a plane waiting for them. And I forget where they're going to fly to, somewhere in South America or something. And they do actually go to the airfield, and it's obviously meant to be sort of this setup. And his other partner that goes ends up getting shot and killed, but the main character, he ends up surviving and being taken into custody. So it's a very elaborate ruse. I mean, this was before true crisis or hostage negotiation teams were set up in New York, which is where it started. So, they were kind of flying by the seat of the pants, and the FBI actually followed New York's model. So they were second to sort of jump on this boat. But he ended up going to prison. He only did 5 years, but the movie came out 3 years later, and he actually threatened a riot if the warden wouldn't let him watch it. And eventually the warden let him watch it in his cell by himself. And of course he had all these criticisms about how it was done. But his lover ended up leaving him while he was in prison. So it was all for nothing. but great
Crime
film.
doesn't pay.
No, crime does not pay, not at all.
I read something interesting about John Cazale, who played his partner in there, and he was also in The Godfather with Pacino. I think he was in Deer Hunter. He's in some great movies, but he criticizes one of the hostages in the movie about smoking. And
Right.
John Cazale died of lung cancer about 3 years after Dog Day Afternoon came out. So,
Oh, yeah, because he says specifically that he doesn't smoke because he doesn't want to get the cancer.
his
Wow.
body's a temple.
Yes. How interesting.
Yeah. Another thing, Dog Day Afternoon is a good example of a bad introduction. When was it Charles Durning? Is that who the detective sergeant
Yes.
gets on the line? It's like, what are you doing, asshole? It's like,
Right.
that's probably not how you should introduce yourself to a suspect holding hostages.
He didn't know what to do. It was like the Wild
Right.
West. And
Now, what are your thoughts on Stockholm in the movie? Because the scene that sticks out to me is when I think the character, the bank teller Miriam, is doing like drills with the rifle and flipping the rifle around. And
Right. I thought about that early on because they get pretty chatty and comfortable with them quite quickly. And as you know, Harry, from watching my presentation, and our listeners from hearing Scott and I drone on for 2 episodes about Stockholm, I don't want to label anything Stockholm syndrome anymore, really.
Right.
I think it's individuals' unique way of dealing with trauma. And, if these people are a little bit charismatic, and if they're buying you pizza and letting you go out and do like little mini interviews with the media, that could be kind of exciting to someone. And especially if you're like, well, these guys don't even know what they're doing and they actually have never threatened us. So I don't know. It's interesting in the movie to see those little clips though of them kind of, sharing cigarettes and things like that.
right. Did
Scott,
you see
anything?
me? I was on TV.
Yeah, I know. Did you have any other films, either of you, that kind of stick out that have good hostage situations or barricades?
I wish we had time. I mean, this is all such fascinating information. One of the ones that's older is Waco Rules of Engagement. And that was back from 1997. I think it was actually a TV movie, but that's a situation, that a real incident occurring that was kind of a watershed moment for these type of interactions, and it ended very badly. But maybe in the future we can come back and talk about some specific real life examples as well as the movie examples we've given. But I think these are all great examples. It's I think one of the things we didn't really touch on is that a lot of this particular genre of movie about hostage negotiation, it's very testosterone driven. I mean, you can count on your hand the number of women
I know
that are in the story. It's pretty funny. It's like,
they're all the moms or the wives.
Yes, exactly.
Well, maybe we need to write a script. There's a ton of funny movies or TV shows that have depictions, and every time you go to a training, someone's using a little clip of Brooklyn Nine-Nine or the other guys.
Best in Show, The Other Guys.
Yeah. So there's plenty out there. Maybe we'll highlight some of those on our Facebook page, gearing up for this episode. But anyway, Harry, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and your expertise. And this was a lot of fun. I'm glad we met and that it worked out.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. I hope we'll be able to have you again for a consultation on another episode.
Love to.
Sounds good. All right. Well, that is going to do it for us today on LA
Not So
Confidential. Bye, everyone.
Bye, folks. Stay safe.